rules. We're not going to do Roberta's rules for a variety of reasons, because I think we decided from the way things are going that those are not important for us to deal with right now. So next on the agenda is really fun stuff, is substantial unanimity, group mind, positionality, majority dominance, minority opinions. Yeah. Pardon me? Well, Peter, as far as I heard, didn't want to do it.
I disagree with that. The reason being that not because I'm aware.
Okay, well, he's not. Okay. Okay, let's do that. Okay. Okay. Okay.
So we've got, that's where we are right now.
Okay.
Can we do this without, just for you guys?
No, we're not ready. That's not till tomorrow.
No, this is today.
No, this is what I'm doing today, is this.
Substantial.
Yeah.
That's at 5.
This,
This is the same thing as this.
well, this wasn't supposed to be till tomorrow.
It's always, you see it over here.
Where is it?
4 o'clock.
Oh, you see what was it, 2 o'clock? Oh, okay, you guys are producing this. Okay, I got it. I got it. Okay, got it. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm good. Okay. Not sure yet. Sorry. I think I need about a half an hour on this, but I may cut it real short. It depends on how quickly I'll get out what I feel like I want to get out. And then we'll open it up. Sure. Okay, so this particular portion of the thing is about the concepts and the traditions as used, as created by Bill Wilson for the 12-step programs. So, excuse me a second. Mike has nicely enough created this chart, so I'll just start with this, which is this chart of the fellowship and the GSB. What's been missing in UA basically is we have a fellowship. What's above the fellowship actually is a construct of recovery. We have a fantastic construct of recovery. Sometimes we can't do agreement how to implement that, but we do have a fantastic construct of recovery. We've got fellows that want to recover, and we've got groups all over the world. We've got groups. What's missing is the middle part, and to a certain extent, what's missing also is a functional GSB. That doesn't mean that the GSB is dysfunctional. Don't get me wrong. It is just not functional in 100% capacity, because for most of its life it hasn't really adhered to the traditions or adhered to the concepts. And specifically the concepts are basically about service, and the reason for that is we don't want to murder people in the process of doing service. Traditionally, what happens when another 12-step program takes over and says we're a 12-step program, and to decide how to service the individuals and how to do business with each other, there are a lot of casualties. And by the casualties, people will leave the fellowship because they're hurt and wounded by the process used by the fellowship to create itself. NA, for example, had a difficult time for 10, 15 years getting off the ground because they were busy with burying the casualties. And by burying, I mean that figuratively. You know, people got wounded. OA had a very difficult time before they accepted the concepts. So in some way, and I know none of you, all of you are here to do this fellowship well. Is there a single person here that came here to destroy this fellowship? If that's so, raise your hand. I don't see a hand being raised, so nobody's really here to try to destroy the fellowship. But we can inadvertently destroy the fellowship by wounding each other. So that's what we really don't want to do. We don't want people to walk away and say, I was really sucked, I'm leaving UA, you know. And how does this happen? It happens because we don't listen to other people, we don't listen to the minority opinion, and we use a dictatorial form to get things done. So what Bill Wilson found out about a long time ago is there's three possible ways of doing business. And one is, I'm the king, I'm the authority, I'm the dictator. It's got to be my way or the highway. That's one positionality, okay? That's where one person has an agenda and does no matter what to push it through to create it, okay? Another positionality is 51% rule. 51% decides, and then the other 49% have to suffer. What Bill Wilson has called that is the tyranny of the majority. The other process I just talked about is the tyranny of the ultra-minority, okay, where an ultra-minority controls the fellowship and forces it to do what it wants. What Bill wanted was a consensus of as close to possible to 100%. That means that, like, what we come to decision, we all come into agreement as close to 100% as possible. Now, 100% is really, really difficult. I don't know if any of you ever been in a group process where they explored consensus really to be 100%. I have. I was in Scott Peck's community building workshop for a long time, and there the task was to try to get the consensus 100%. About 24 years ago, I was in Esalen for a 19-day codependency workshop, where the whole time we were there in the workshop, we were in teams. In those teams, we had to agree 100%. In other words, if we wanted to go to the spa, we had to make an agreement 100% that all five of us go to the spa together. This is very, very difficult, because some people are codependent, they'll agree to anything, and other people are counterdependent, which is all addicts are counterdependent. And the counterdependent, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go do that. They're counterdependent. I'm not going to go with you. I want to do the other thing. So it's a task of coming to group agreement, which is a group mind, which Bill Wilson called a group conscience, being of the same mind. And think about this is like if there's a symphony. If we're all in a symphony and all of us have our own instruments to play, and he goes beep, she goes deet deet, he goes deet deet deet, she goes deet 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 deet, deet 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 deet. Before you know it, we got a piece of music, and it was created by everybody. Okay? Now sometimes that means, let's say we're going to create a piece of music, Mike starts. Another time Mike says, you know, I started last time. She starts with the piece of music, creating a piece of music and a piece of improvised music. So in other words, it's all about creating a group mind. A group mind is about agreement, okay? In order to have a group mind, you must, first of all, if there's issues like this, you must have discussion about the issues. Okay? The discussion is the most important thing. What most people do when they want to get something done, they come up with an idea and then they try to push it through. That's kind of the disease. That's kind of the first position of my way, or the king syndrome, or the dictator syndrome, or the director syndrome. I'm the director of this show and it's going to happen just the way it was. So the idea is, when you get into group construction like this, it's great to have your own ideas, but come here with the thought of, I am going to allow myself to be changed. Because no matter what, you're going to get changed. If you're willing, your ideas are going to be changed. Some of you guys here are from a group, and a group has given you a mandate to, like, explore a certain particular issue in a certain particular way, and maybe devote yes on this and no on something else. But they've also entrusted you to be an individual. So as an individual, as per the concepts and the traditions, you have an obligation to participate in the group mind and have a willingness to be changed and to have a decision made based on the group mind. Okay, so they sort of decided, okay, as close as possible to 100% unanimity is 66%. So anything that is voted on, number one, first of all, ought to be discussed as thoroughly as possible. And out of that discussion comes emotion. Now, I'll give you an example of how the GSB has been operating. Now, this is not meant to be any criticism of how we're operating, but just give you an example of an aspect of how we're operating a little dysfunctionally. Okay, so what happens is we only meet once a month for an hour and a half. Somebody comes up with an idea of an emotion. It's rarely ever discussed beforehand. In other words, there isn't like lots of phone calls and saying, hey, I got this idea. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? The discussion doesn't happen that way. And what happens is often someone's pet idea gets introduced. Another person, they say, you know, because of Robert's rules, we'll do it this way. You have to have a second to get something going. And then all of a sudden, something's on a table. And the minute that's on a table, anything else not related to the table isn't valid. And you're forced to spend X amount of time discussing this thing that never came out of a group conscience to begin with. It came out of an individual conscience, and the individual also has a positionality. No matter how nice that person is, no matter how well-meaning that person is, the unconscious is that person then has an invested interest in pushing that thing through, which is called positionality. People take positionalities on certain issues and they try to push it through. So this is why Bill, when he, first of all, I'll give you an example. When the big book was first thought about being written, he didn't want to write it. He wanted Sam Shoemaker to write it. He just didn't want to do it. Finally, they said, no, Bill, Shoemaker said himself, you're the one that's got to do that. So how did they do that? I brought a copy of this. I'm diverging here a little bit. Have you guys ever heard about the big book and how much it sold for, the actual first copy, the manuscript with all the things? How many millions of dollars did it sell for recently? Somebody heard a nod? It sold for like $2.5 million. I have a mimeographed copy of the first big book with all the notations of all the changes. At that time, there were 71 members in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't even called Alcoholics Anonymous. They haven't even called the name yet. So what Bill did is he wrote it, and then he sent out a mimeographed copy, a copy to every individual. And here's a copy that was sent to Clarence, for example, for Clarence to look at and make notations of before it was approved. And these copies were sent to psychiatrists, religious leaders all over the country, and they looked at this thing, they made notations, and they sent it back to Bill and other people, and then they took all that in before this was approved. And here's how it looks like. Hang on a sec. So here's a copy of 73 and 74 as it's sent out. So this is a group process where one person comes up with something and then sent out to the group for review, and the group has their input to write and rewrite certain things, and then they make the adjustments accordingly. Now this is a process that has not been yet involved in UA. This is a process that has not been involved yet in UA. For one thing, almost anything that so far we have decided at the GSB level has never been brought back to the fellowship for review. So we've made decisions sort of in isolation with the best meaning, you know. And the other thing is, none of us are elected. We were just walk-on people that wanted to do this service. You know, and all well-meaning, but we weren't elected by you guys to do this. And we never really bounced this thing back. So that's why all this thing is great about the conference, because you guys can bring back these motions to your groups, and ideally, hopefully, if we come up with a definition of abstinence, it'll get filtered back to your group, and maybe there's one person in your group that'll come up with the most brilliant thing in the world. Do you guys know how what word Alcoholics Anonymous came about? Well, they had a group conscience like this. They had 30, 35 guys sitting around. What should we call it? Bill said, well, how about the Bill W. movement? And they says, no, Bill, we ain't going to go for that, you know? And so on and so forth. And there was a kind of a drunk, derelict guy in the back. He had wet brain, and he kept mumbling, anonymous alcoholics, anonymous alcoholics. And finally said, hey, that sounds really good. Let's call ourselves Alcoholics Anonymous. So here comes the name of this particular movement out of a person that was the least sound of mind to do it. Seriously. Seriously, think about that. That's almost as magical as him coming up earlier. How come we, instead of calling it approved literature, why don't we just call it created literature? Not saying that you're wet brain. All I'm saying is it just takes one person to say something brilliant, and you have to send it back to the groups. When you have this kind of a group involvement, that's when it becomes magical. When you allow the first positionality of a king, dictator, and people, what happens? Look, there's many fellowships on this planet, and almost all of them need to be on this planet for a certain reason. And Bill Wilson isn't considered a great man because he wrote the 12 and 12 and because he wrote the big book. His claim to fame is that he was considered the greatest social architect of the 20th century. What does that mean to be a social architect? That means you've designed a new system of social people being amongst each other that has been completely new since the beginning of mankind. And what part of it is the substantial unanimity. That no matter what happens, we come to agreement in substantial unanimity. And if it doesn't happen, there's a minority opinion. The minority opinion is valued. In fact, it is sought out. There is no other system where if there's a vote and the vote is like 7 to 10, which means that it will be accepted, that you then turn over the podium to the minority opinion, and the minority opinion has one more attempt to persuade the majority to change its opinion. And if, Mike, say the answer, what happens if? If one person from the majority decides, yes, we will revote, the whole thing starts all over again. The discussion starts all over again. One time, yeah, because we've had a case where we went on and on and on and on. One time. And then what happens is the whole thing gets talked about the beginning, and you have a revote. You have a revote. And sometimes if it's a really sensitive issue, the substantial unanimity goes up to 75%. 80%. It all depends because what happens is we all want to be part of the group mind. Now, the group mind is a big, powerful thing. You guys think, blah, 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 blah. But this process, there are corporations all around the world that are hiring other people that are specialists in how to create group mind for their enterprises because their corporations are stuck. And so they want to get into committees and learn how to get off of positionalities and to get more into cooperation with each other. I'll give you two instances that happened that have directly to do with the 12-step processes. Hewlett-Packard, there was an alcoholic that was on the board of Hewlett-Packard many years ago, about 25 years ago, and it was highly dysfunctional. So he decided as an experiment, because he was an alcoholic, to bring in the traditions and the concept in that corporation. And the productivity increased to 65-75%. And not only did the productivity increase, the members loved interacting with each other afterwards. And before that, they couldn't stand each other. They wanted to knife each other and bury each other in the backyard someplace. You know what I mean? And even more than that, this process of thinking about how we interrelate with each other, I'm going to make a bold statement and then I'm going to explain it to you, was partially responsible for the end of the Cold War. Okay, I'll finish with this sentence. The 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts were smuggled into Russia. Russians started having AA meetings for their alcoholism, and they loved the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts. It created such an undercurrent of reactivity in communism that Gorbachev, it was one of the things that happened. Gorbachev decided he didn't want to fight it. He didn't want to fight the battle anymore, and he decided, and he was a CIA person, not CIA, what is that, the KGB guy. He decided he didn't want to fight against his own people. And so this concept, this is an ultra-freedom kind of concept. This concept helped break down the Iron Curtain. So this is why this is so important for us to do, because if we don't do this, we'll just be another fellowship that just never really got their act together, where a few people control the top things, make the decisions, and this is what I don't want, and I don't think any of you really want it. You want to build the best fellowship possible. So that's why I'm not talking about the other concepts and so on and so forth. I'm talking about this one idea, because it's really the most important idea, is how we deal with each other. Now, we can use Robert's rules. We can steal anything from Robert's rules, Roberta's rules, their processes, but then we have to make it our own. Bill's took from here, there, and there, and there, and there, and everywhere, but introduce it, have other people discuss it, come to some agreement on it, and then we can use it. But to use any particular process is illogical. That's why we don't use any outside enterprises. I don't know that I have anything else to say on it. I'd like to open up to questions if possible, if you have any questions. Ed's going to come and talk a little bit. Did you still want to talk about something?
Well, there was...
I was hoping that me and you would do a simple back and forth thing, because you've been on the GSB and you've been in Okay, all right, and then you can come up and then we can do our song and dance. Okay, good. 10 minutes or less. Anybody got any questions?
You got to come up and say the word.
Yeah, Tamia? Yeah, so if you got questions about any of this, come up. So basically, since you guys are in position of service, and it's kind of important for you to read the concepts in the long form of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then if you want to get further explanations, read the concepts as interpreted by other programs. They've interpreted them their own way, and sometimes they make more sense reading it in more modern language than in 1950 dated legalese kind of language.
My experience is chairing meetings and using Robert's rules to maintain order and get clear and make sure everybody's heard. And we do use that processes. Is everyone in here familiar with Robert's rules? Because I had to study them to be a chair. Anyone familiar with Robert's rules? Okay, because we talked just a smidget about those. We use Robert's rules as it pertains to our business meetings, and again, we get results, we get solution. Is there any, I know everything is suggested and nothing's set in stone, but have the processes of Robert's rules, is that something that we want to, that we want to suggest to groups on how to run a business meetings? I find it very important to do just this, and I'm finding in other outside meetings, people are not familiar with that process, and they're running meetings, and people are wounded. Robert's rules have kept, again, those wounds from happening at our meetings, and for me, it was a requirement for me to study those in order to be a business meeting chair. So that's something that is known in this fellowship. Is it something that is known in this fellowship?
No, in fact, Robert's rules are really not used in any fellowship. I mean, a group can use any process it wants, but officially, no, it's not. Officially, no. You can take aspects of Robert's rules and come into agreement on them and then decide to use them, but to use Robert's rules per se, no. I have never experienced a business meeting of any fellowship myself where someone says, well, this is the way we do it in Robert's rules and this is why they got to do it. This is just another example of someone trying to run with their own positionality and making it work. Now, that doesn't mean that that your group can, you know, for some reason or other can make it work. Fine. It's up to any group to decide what they want to do, but it really is an outside issue.
It's a fourth tradition issue.
Yeah, it's an outside edition. Outside, you know, you can take any aspects of it and say, here's this aspect that I want to use for our business meetings. But again, the voting ought to be at 66%. Robert's Rules is a governing kind of system. It is not a substantial unanimity kind of a system based on full discussion and full transparency. It is not based on that. It's based on completely different ideology, and that's why it was never used by the founders of the 12-step programs, because they found it somewhat toxic.
Okay.
But anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Connie. I'm a compulsive under-earner recovering in this program, and I just want to piggyback on what what Tamya said as far as Robert's rules. And my experience in UA is that there is not a lot of familiarity with Robert's rules. You know, I've definitely heard it from, you know, from a few fellows specifically, and it's been applied in certain business meetings and with regard to certain situations that have arisen within meetings. It just doesn't seem to be something that is, you know, is readily knowledgeable within the fellowship as a whole. And it's definitely been my experience that there's been quite a few newcomers who UA is their first 12-step program. And so I guess I just want to pose the question that it might be a good idea to at least present the Robert's rules in a way of keeping people informed and or knowledgeable about that there is this tool that is available, because I find that a lot of people are not aware of Robert's rules and or how to implement or use them.
Yeah. Again, it is not a tool that's generally used because the tools used are traditions and the concepts. And so consequently, we can take any idea that's in Robert's rules or Roberta's rules or anything like that and make it used for our business meetings, but in general, the tool itself, you know, and as an entity, is not being used because it's real simple. The process is real simple: full discussion, then vote with substantial unanimity, and then a minority expresses its opinion. If for some reason or other the majority chooses to revote, then there's a new discussion and a new revote. This is to make sure that nothing is ever forced onto the group, that there's full agreement going on. And in Robert's rules, that's an example of 51% rule. That's an example of what is that? Where tyranny of the majority, to a certain extent. It's used. That's how it's usually used. And it's used in business situations, but this is not a business situation. This is a 12-step situation. This is a spiritual organization. It's not the same thing. But yes. Mm-hmm.
You have to be on the microphone.
Yeah, I understand.
Ed, she has to be on the microphone.
Okay, you have to be on the mic to be recorded. I fully understand that, and those are all aspects that can be used in any particular business meetings. But to say we categorically adopt Robert's rules, it's not It's really not functional. No.
This, folks, is Robert's rules. Look at how
Yeah.
thick it is.
Yeah, it's not germane to us. Okay, go ahead next.
Hi, I'm Steve. Thank you, Eddie, for an inspiring and informative presentation. I learned a lot. I just with this discussion about Robert's Rules of Orders, my experience with that and things like student government is, and my knowledge of how the world works. It's a set of rules. It's not the set of rules. You can pick and choose from it, but every organization has to make their own rules, and there are usually some type of adaptation from Robert's Rules. And in that regard, I'm sort of curious, or maybe offer a suggestion, because what you said about the GSB and how someone makes a motion and all of a sudden everyone has to vote on it, that derail. They get immediate gratification from getting the thing talked about, but in the long run, it doesn't serve the whole fellowship to have it run that way. And why doesn't the GSB have some rule where new business like that can't be voted on at the time, but it has to be set for a calendar, and maybe have a subcommittee, maybe have some prior discussion, so that when you vote on important things, it's been aired, there's been opportunity, there's been people understand what the issues. You don't just come into a meeting and say, well, we need to vote on this. Everyone says, oh, that's important. Well, we better vote and better decide, because you start deciding everything like that. So in such a urgent matter, you don't get a view of the total scope and you don't get full discussion. So thank you.
Absolutely, and that's a difficulty in a new fellowship, creating how we work with each other. That's the real secret, and this is what we're doing here. This is our first attempt. This is our first attempt to do this. We've never attempted to do this before. There's a theory called, any of you guys know about the 100 monkey theory? That, okay, we're not yet at the 100 monkey. How many of us are here? There's what, 42 of us, 34 of us, something like that here. We're not even here at the 100 monkey syndrome yet, So, but we're in a very, very early gestation period of this fellowship in many, many ways. Did you want to come up there? Go ahead. Okay, 100 monkey syndrome. In simplicity, some anthropologists went to little islands and they saw a monkey not doing anything. So the anthropologists were washing his potatoes. They come back a year later. On that island, there might be 42 monkeys, and all of those monkeys are washing the potatoes. So they imitated the anthropologists from washing the potatoes. However, they went to another island that could not be gotten to except by air or by water, and we know monkeys don't fly, and monkeys don't have boats to go from island to island. All of a sudden, you see the same monkeys a couple years later washing the potatoes. So there's a group conscience, there's a group mind. The theory is that the monkeys are connected with. Collective unconscious, to use the Jungian term, So that's all I'm saying, is so far the collective unconscious is we're not all on the same wavelength yet. Okay. Let's
that
just
time?
do these and
Okay.
then we'll stop, okay?
Okay. So I've heard you describe this before, and I philosophically great, but Robert's rules, like ever since I've been in 12-step, Robert's rules, whether they've followed them directly or not, create some order among, people, and, when we're all in our addiction. So I think to sort of say Robert's rules is not in the spirit of, we need to be, it's sort of a large statement to me.
It's probably not the best way of stating my idea, but I understand where you're coming from, yes.
Right. So to come up with a clear set of guidelines to create substantial unanimity that everyone follows and that groups can adopt as they see according to their group conscience. But to sort of go, you get where I'm coming from.
I got you.
Thanks.
Are we at time? Or are we
You go ahead, Tamia. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay, and just for clarity, because this is about this, for me as a under earner, it's about clarity. This is just a quick sample of how we conducted using the Roberts rules. In the meeting, we say the Serenity Prayer, of course. The chair, of course, people are asked to speak before someone speaks out, so we're not jumping all over each other. We ask, may I approach the chair? That doesn't happen. We reiterate again because, again, we're hard of hearing and we need to refocus. So before you even speak to the chair, you have to ask to speak to the chair. And it's not about power. It's about us having clarity and order. Their reports, secretary reports, treasurer's reports, GSB, and other reports. We do old business, and that's a part of Robert's Rules, new business, and adjournment. Now, when a motion is made, there are some meetings where you have to put the motion in 2 weeks or a month ahead to the secretary. Then they pass that along to the chair. Again, we're looking at a structure here. When a new motion is made, it must be seconded. And this is according to Robert's Rules, and followed by a discussion. Discussion is as such, where there are 3 pros, 3 people speak up, whether they alternating between pros and cons. Why we like this motion, why we don't like this motion. 3 pros and 3 cons, again, alternating. Then after that discussion, the chairperson calls the question, of course, which means to vote on that meeting. And of course, the same processes happens with even adjourning the meeting, but we do not need a discussion of that. If a motion is shot down, the person who made the motion is giving a motion can be tabled if it gets a little bit complex, or the person who made the motion, if it is shot down, they can bring it up again in 3 months. So it's very simple how we took these Roberts Rules and created a meeting. So and again, everybody gets to. It's not like, okay, we voted on this, you're cut off, but everybody gets to have a say in what goes on. And it's a simple structure, and it has worked. I'm not saying I'm not suggesting that to anybody do it, but I'm just giving a sample of what has kept the meetings I have attended in order. And, that's it in a nutshell. So that's all.
I see what you're saying there, and the only... In the realm of this concept here, I would have a problem with that, is that the motion got created before discussion. There was very little discussion in creating the motion, and then the discussion is limited to 2 for and 2 against. So the idea in the 12-step process, as Bill has envisioned, is full discussion. As full discussion as possible, to include as many viewpoints as possible, and it cannot be done under that particular template of process. It may work very, very well for your business meetings, yet at the same time, some people may have a problem with that and find that their voice is not being heard in that particular thing. And there might have been another process that was available if that original thought might have been disseminated first and discussed first before the motion even came about. It's too limiting to do it that way. In this ideology, may work.
My comment about that is, I held up this book that was about 2 inches thick, and the point that I was trying to make was that if you need a book that's 2 inches thick to describe Robert's Rules, that means that probably nobody in this room understands all of them. Okay? And it's a lot like, Frank, I work in finance and financial risk in particular. And there are a lot of people who think they understand financial risk because they want to skate over the surface of it. And Robert's Rules, it's the same thing. Okay, yeah, everybody knows that you run a meeting. Yeah, there's old business before new business. Fine. But does a point of information supersede a point of order? Can you make a point of order in the if somebody has made a motion to adjourn? If you make a motion to adjourn, does it need to be seconded? What happens if somebody? The point is, there are all these subtleties. I mean, it's a lot like the laws of kashrut, if you know about Judaism. I mean, the laws of keeping kosher are very complicated. And you go to you study these Talmudic laws for years to get them all straight. And that's exactly what I think you really need to do with Robert's Rules, to really get it all straight. You think you understand it on a superficial level. But the fact is that, look, I've been chairing these meetings for more than a year. And what I've seen is all sorts of people doing all sorts of things because they have their own axe to grind, and they use Robert's Rules not to serve the meeting, but to serve their own, as Eddie would say, positionality. And I don't like it. I'm really sick of it. And the big reason, frankly, why I wanted to have this is because I want clear and well-understood rules of order so that on September 20th, when I run a GSB meeting, none of the nonsense that has happened before happens again.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I'm done. I'm done. Okay. So, did you want to come and do something?
Well, the thing that I want to encourage everybody to do is you should all have received a document describing how we are going to vote. Because, as I explained this morning, if we don't come out of here with motions, yes. Excuse me. Let me explain something else. I'll explain what that document is. That's not it. Some of you received 2 documents. Those of you in the Service Structure Committee received 2 documents. But the one that I'm talking about does not have any boldface print up top. It just starts out, in order to be brought to a vote. And the purpose of that is so that we can actually make some decisions. What I'm hoping is that we will have more committee time today, and maybe some even tomorrow morning. I'm not sure quite what the schedule is. And that we will prepare written proposals. And those written proposals will be voted on tomorrow. And I'm hoping that we will approve that document as a means of deciding how we vote. Now, pardon? Okay.
If it hasn't been printed out, and I think it has.
No, it has been printed out. A number of us have copies. I have a few extra copies, I think.
But you'll have it anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
Since there's Wi-Fi, is there a way you can put it on the group thing?
Well, actually, even there's a document that we can look at on the screen.
Well, I did read it this morning. I'm perfectly happy to read it again before we vote on it. Probably I should distribute it. So I want everybody to have a chance to read it because I don't want anybody to complain about the fact that, oh, well, we rushed to judgment here, I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. I want everybody to read it. I don't want any stuff about, oh, well, I didn't have a chance to read it. I want people to be very clear about what they're doing and say yes or no. Okay, Janice.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure I understand exactly. At first, I thought you said we were going to use these guidelines for our voting here.
Yes, voting here only.
Okay.
There is another document that I prepared for those of us on the Service Structure Committee that is supposed to describe how we vote at GSB meetings. GSB meetings are different because they are phone meetings.
Okay, so my other question is, so if somebody wants to vote on something or a motion, you wrote a description as short as possible. No, that's not what you said, but you want a short description, so...
Right. So they have to be written out. So that means that people have to get on the dime and do something.
Okay, so...
and something specific and clear. Yeah.
I'm feeling like a child. I know you have a lot of energy behind
Right.
this, but I just want to bring that to
You're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's a character defect, so fine. Okay.
My question is, I just have one question, is how does this address, like, once you... to bring something to vote, are we going to have, like Eddie said, chance to discuss it, or how does that part of it play into what we're trying to do here?
Okay. The answer is that all of the discussion will take place in the committee. And the committee as a whole will craft this proposal. And so it has to be either, basically when we get to the full session, basically it's going to have to be up or down, because we don't have time to do any more than that.
Okay, well, I just want to comment on the record as saying that if it's a proposal or motion created by committee, they've discussed it, but they're presenting it to the group as a whole, and other people might need to ask questions of clarity or to gain understanding. So
right. Okay. That's why it is that when you, what I said was that if you are going to vote for or against a motion, you are representing that A, you have read it, and all of your questions have been answered. That's why it is that the documents have to be received beforehand. Now, we have to work out a schedule for this to make sure that people have a chance to read it, think about it, and ask the committee that authored it what the deal is.
Tamia, recovering compulsive under-earner. As I'm looking at this is the same as Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules is not. As I'm looking at this is the same exact, because I've studied Robert's Rules as it pertains to our meeting. It's very little difference, and also it's not, just because you see a thick book, the big book is a thick book, it's not scary. The questions this gentleman asked Ed about, do people know how to do this, do people know how to do that, all that is explained in Robert's Rules. I have a copy at home. When to adjourn, so on and so forth. It's not scary, it's not intimidating, just because it's a thick book. So,
and calculus is the same way. My
opinion, like I'm saying, will get you under earning of how I feel about something. So do not let that thickness scare you. And all the questions this gentleman asked, like, do people know this? Do people know that? It is in Robert's Rules. There's no vagueness. There's no scariness about it. So I just want to make that clear, you know.
Okay. So, Bella?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bella.
Okay, so this is Robert's Rules.
Mm-hmm.
I could almost say pick a page. Okay. So this is Robert's Rules, and I could almost invite anybody to pick a page, and I'll read a paragraph.
Go ahead.
Somebody pick a page.
42.
42. Okay. Okay, what paragraph do you want?
Second one.
Second one. Okay. The consideration of a main motion, basic stages. Once the main motion has been brought before the assembled body, which body is that? GSB, this one. Through the 3 steps described above, there are 3 further basic steps, which are that the motion is considered in the ordinary and simplest case, unless it is adapted by a unanimous comment, as explained on page 54 to 56. These are the normal steps as follows. Members debate the motion. It says debate. It doesn't say 2 against and 2 for, which is usually about 2 minutes, and then somebody says, let's call the question because they want to move on. Apart from that, to say that this is not scary, I'm not scared of this. I just think it is borderline useless, because we spend so much time deciding which part of it we're going to use. So I'm not against this. I'm simply saying, is it appropriate for us to get decisions made? And I don't feel that it is. So the debate about whether or not this is a good book, a scary book, a nice book, I think misses the point. Can we use this to make decisions efficiently, given where the fellowship is right now, and the manpower we have right now, and the bandwidth we have right now? And for me, the answer is no. Thank you.
Very well said. Yes, go ahead.
I'm Sonia Underearner. And I just want to acknowledge everyone who spoke today. I think our common purpose, I'm a little confused, but I think our common purpose is we want to vote on something by tomorrow. Because I know I went and stretched in order to be here this week, and I really want to make sure that we move forward. And what I'm hearing from the GSB committee is they've been having people say, we don't want to use Robert's rules at the conference. So they're trying to work with everyone here. Is that what's going on? To find a way that we can all agree, because some people have said they don't want to use Robert's rules. So that's what they're doing. They're saying, we come up with an agreement so we can start voting tomorrow on something. Because I go to conferences and all they are votes. We don't spend time discussing. We just are voting. You know, all day yesterday we would have been voting. Today we're voting on issues already. This is all done before you get to the conference, so that we don't even know how to vote on an issue. We got to get going here. So what I'm hearing is everyone needs to bend and come together. And your sheet overwhelms me. I know you mean well in your heart. It totally overwhelms me. I think if I could see a role play of a business meeting in progress using that, maybe that would help.
Okay. No, you don't want to do that. We could do the 3.5-hour one that went on. That would be kind of crazy. No, let me just, before you say so, but come on up. What was I going to say?
Ed, I have something to say.
Sure, Mike.
Okay. Ed, with all due respect.
It's a joke.
With all due respect, for the last 7 years, the GSB that Andrew and myself have been involved in have been using a modified version of Robert's Rules. So to stand up here and tell people that you're not familiar with AA or any other 12-step using Robert's Rules, I think I really don't know where that came from, because we have used a modified version of Robert's Rules. Every GSP call I've been on, every business meeting I've been on, we've used Robert's Rules.
But that's not what I said. I said in general it's not a 12-step process.
Not done. Okay? A lot of people, a lot smarter than us, have taken Robert's Rules and modified it and narrowed it down to about a 4 or 5 page document, which I've sent out numerous times to the GSB. So if we want to look at that, we can. If we want to waive, the 100-page book, which I did not send around, we can do that. But, every AA meeting I've ever been to, I've been in, 14 years in various fellowships, every, dry goods program, every other fellowship, they all use the modified versions of Robert's Rules. I don't see why we can't do that. Ed's paper, is actually a modified version of Robert's Rules. The part he leaves out, and this is where you're having a problem, Ed, I don't know where Ed went, is the discussion piece. It's silent. It just says, okay, the motions come in, we review them, and now we vote. Well, there's this whole big discussion part that you talked about, which is not written there. And that's where we start going like, okay, is there a point of information? Is there not? Are we stopping discussion? Are we continuing discussion? Are we calling the question? All these kinds of things that we all know has happened on GSB calls for many years. Mm-hmm. So I got to say, I'm a little miffed by this, but... I'm willing to hear you guys out, but I think you're going to have problems if you don't outline exactly in writing how things get discussed.
Actually, I'm for creating a flow of things like that, and if they come from Robert's Rules, fine. That's my point. I'm saying often we do not go into full discussion. This afternoon, some of you guys brought some stuff to the table that has never been discussed in any public forum in UA ever. And these are very, very, very important things, like what happens in an 8:30 meeting, and some things about 13-stepping, and some other things. Now, I'm talking about the highly controversial things. There's also some medium controversial things, how we've done with, public outreach and so on and so forth. These things have never really been fully discussed. And that is one of the main precepts of the 12-step program, is to fully discuss them. Most of the people that I know that have karate chop experience with Robert's Rules use that to control the positionalities of getting their things done without really full discussion. And that's all I'm saying is, I don't care what sequence of events you have toward voting, as long as full discussion is involved.
Oh, well, let me just say that. Let me
Yeah. We're almost done.
I was just going to say what Sonia said is true. I've been to other World Service conferences, and it's voting. The discussion has happened in committee. This is what I talked about last night. The discussion has been happening in committee. It's been sent out. There's, cogent communication. Everybody's on email these days. You can see what's being presented. Ed's saying do a written motion. Everyone gets to look at it. When you get to the meeting or the conference, you vote. You don't sit there and discuss for 2 hours what's going on in the literature. You vote on it. It either yes, no, shoot it back out to the fellowship. And, if we don't get going on that, if we leave here after 3 days, it's not about anyone quitting or not us being. It's going to be all the people you go back to and say, hey, how was the conference? What did you get decided? And we say this, guess what? There's not going to be a lot more conferences. There's just not. Because people want things to happen. We hit this situation about 4 or 5 years ago. The GSB responded. We got the pamphlet. We got a lot of things done. This is where we are, folks. We got to just come up with a way to make decisions. We got to get it in writing, and we got to move forward.
Okay. Okay. I think we ought to close this part unless there's more. Want to say something too?
Well, I guess my question is, you're on the service structure.
Yeah.
You're on the service structure committee,
Yeah.
and Mike is on it, and Ed is on it. So can you guys come together between the three of you?
Sure.
You all have the point. I think the thing that I was just going to share, which is a little, when I went and did my own study of this, it's the principles.
Yeah.
It's the principles of patience, tolerance, compassion. That's why they created Robert's Rules. Do they work for UA? Maybe, maybe not. But it's like principle-based. You guys, we have it here. Just come up with it and articulate it. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, before you speak, Joella, so people have wanted to have a meeting tonight at when everything ends. So a UA meeting tonight after all the activities, whatever we end, 9:30, 9:45, 10 o'clock, there will be a meeting here. Go ahead, Bella.
I actually don't think you're saying the same thing. I think you're using similar words, but you're not saying the same thing.
Okay.
As I see it, what is missing is the discussion.
Yes.
Discussion comes first.
Yes.
And then there's a proposal for a motion. Now, the idea that you make a motion and then have a discussion, I think, is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
All of that needs to take place first. And what I see in the GSB and UA as a whole, we have no forums for discussion. Mike talks about the committees. The committees in the main are not populated. So the discussion cannot be had, not because of principles. Hold on, Mike, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, this is what we're doing. Yeah, but we're just populating them now. Because it's not about principles. It's about people. You don't have the people to have the discussion. And that is why we always come up against this. There's no point talking about a services and structures committee if there are only 2 people there who meet once a month. You're not going to have discussion. You're not going to have motions. And there's nothing to vote on. So what I think would be useful is for us to have a flow chart of how things move, how topics move. If we have a flow chart, have you had discussion? No. Then you can't pass go. And after the discussion, have you now put it in a form where it is a proposal for a motion? No. Then we can't move. I think something as simple as that will be better than either Robert's Rules as a book or its modified form, so that people have 7 steps to get a motion to a vote. Something as simple as that is what I would like to see.
I like
3
that.
steps.
I like that. Do you guys like that? Just as a show of hands, do you like that idea? Yeah, everybody seems to like that. Okay, so why don't you write up those 7 steps?
You know what? I can make a flow chart right now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
let's
good.
do it.
Good.
I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, let's do that, and let's do something on this tonight. That's brilliant. Go ahead.
No, I mean right now.
Right now? You want to do right now?
Yeah,
Take the
I just
microphone.
want to say this. The importance of this conference is not about voting on specific things, but forming the conscience and developing from there that we are going to be more active to our fellow members, and then eventually we will have what we want. So this is it.
Yes.
So we are forming it. So if we come out with 0 or 1 decision, it's okay. It's okay because this is for a long term.
Yes.
So that's what you have to look at.
What's the agenda? Are we?
We're supposed to go on until 6, but we can end early if you guys want to.
Just a 5-minute break.
Well,
Yeah, you know,
I'm going to speak to that. There
yeah, you
was
know, I'll write things out.
Ed, can I just?
And Walt and the rest of you guys should take a break. How's that? All right. How about we break? Can we do 10 minutes?
We could do a 10-minute break, but everybody, if you can be back in your seats in 10 minutes, because we're going to dinner at 6 o'clock.
You know what?
There was
And then what I'd
there
really
was
like
some
to see-
stragglers at the end of the last break, but we're going to start promptly in 10 minutes.